Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. It's about 10:30 in the morning, December 16th, 1944, and we're in Belgium. We're here to play our playthrough of Lanzerath Ridge, designed by David Thompson and Nils Johansson, published by Verssen Games. Now, in this solitaire tactical level game of World War II combat, we take charge of a small contingent of US soldiers as they try to fight off successive waves of German attackers at the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. Now, in this episode, episode 0, we're going to do an overview of the key mechanics so that when we jump into episode 1 and the gameplay, we'll be able to get started without having to slow down for any rules explanations. I also want to do a little bit of background here because there's two things to know before we jump in and start looking at the game. Thing number 1, I've intentionally learned the game and played the game only one time. Now, I lost at the end of the second of 4 waves, the very end of the second of 4 waves, mind you. And I want to do that intentionally so that I don't kind of know what I'm doing yet. I think that's going to create for a little bit more drama and perhaps tension in our gameplay. Thing number 2, we've replaced all of the actual soldiers who fought in this battle with viewers from this YouTube channel who have volunteered to be in our 19-person contingent defending Lanzerath Ridge. So, we're going to check to see where they're all positioned and talk a little bit about some of their skills before we start as well. And with that, let's jump in and get started. Here's a look at the battlefield on the morning of December 16th, 1944. At about 10:30 a.m. Again, we can see snow-covered fields, and the U.S. positions that we're defending are to the top part of the screen. We can see those lighter white counters, which are all the U.S. forces, and we'll take a closer look at those momentarily. And the German attackers are going to come up from the bottom of the field, bottom of the screen, come across this field and try to reach our defensive positions. Now let's take a quick look at how the Germans are going to attack. And basically, they're going to funnel down 8 different possible lanes. So starting on the west here, we can see the outside left, the kind of the western flank, if you would, of the German attack. And basically, there's these 3 circles that the German forces are going to advance up. They're going to successively move forward here. And our job is for our defenders in here to basically take them out before they can reach our defensive positions. We can also see a booby trap up here that the defenders could run into. And over here, this rectangular spot is where their machine gun nest is going to come into place. Because yes, the Germans have machine gun nests. Now, if we kind of fan to the east here a little bit, we can see our second and third kind of attack lanes, if you would. These are actually numbered 1 and 2. The outside ones, the flanking ones, have different numbers, but we'll show how that works as we go forward. We can see that we've got 3 riflemen making their way out of the woods, heading into this open field, heading up to our positions a little bit closer to the north here. We can see our positions in these defensive positions up here, and we've got some barbed wire and a fence that they're going to need to cross as well. You'll notice that this is really 2 attack lanes. It forks at this point. Some of the attackers are going to fork a little bit to the east and some to the west. So these are kind of the first of our middle 3 attack lanes, if you would. And then successively, that happens again over here where we see another attack lane. We can see German riflemen making their way through the woods here into the open field, crossing the open field. We can see here our other 2 attack lanes. They hit the barbed wire fence, they can fork here and fork here, they can hit this barbed wire fence, and they can fork here and fork here. And the barbed wire fence has the potential to hold up the attackers for a little while, depending upon some other conditions as well. Then as we slide over farther to the east, we can see our other outside flanking position, trying to get around our positions where the Germans are going to basically work their way through the woods to try to get to our eastern flank. Now, there are a number of different kinds of German soldiers. Let's take a look at those. Here are the different types of German soldiers that are going to be attacking today. We have standard riflemen. We have 2 types of a Fallschirmjäger, which is a level 2 and a level 3, different types of weaponry basically. Then we have leaders, and we'll talk a little bit about how leaders function in the game. And then there's a special unit that shows up, a special soldier that shows up at the 3rd wave, which is a medic. And they are pesky because one of them is a forward observer. So we have to take out the forward observer, otherwise the mortars that the Germans have will be extremely lethal. So what these numbers mean on the German units, that if these units reach one of our defensive positions, that's the number of attack dice they roll to try to take us out. But to be totally honest, if these German units, if the soldiers reach our defensive positions, we've probably lost. So the idea is that that never happens. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the special ability of the leaders as well. The leaders here, if troops, up to 3 troops get stuck on the barbed wire. You can have 3 troops piled up in the space behind the barbed wire. Once they surpass that, they push forward. But if there's a leader that shows up in that attack row, an attack line basically, then they immediately bypass the barbed wire. So the leader kind of keeps the attack moving from that perspective. Lastly, I want to mention the German machine gun nests. There are 4 of them and they are somewhat lethal, so we want to try to take those out as quickly as we possibly can. So now let's take a quick look at how the German attacks are going to work. So the Germans are going to attack in 4 waves, and each one of the waves is driven by its own unique attack deck. So what we're looking at right now is the first attack deck consisting of 24 cards that's going to drive the German first wave of the attack. Now, how we win the game is basically survive all 4 waves of attacks and then pick up at least 1 point from our morale, some intelligence that we might capture, or from a couple of other objectives that we might complete in the course of the battle. We'll talk more about that later. For now, our objective is to survive the 4 waves. Now, each one of the waves consists of different turns, if you would. And each turn, we flip over 3 of these cards, and this tells us where we're going to position the German attackers and what they're going to do. So, for example, if we flip over this first card here, it's Machine Gun Nest, and it tells us to place or activate this machine gun in position A. The A corresponds, if we come over here, to this machine gun nest right here. So we're going to drop a machine gun right in this nest here. Now, if we come back to our deck, that's the first thing we would do. Then we're going to look at the second card in that turn. Oh, another machine gun, place in A. So we drop a second machine gun in there. And then hopefully this will be different. Assault. Here we go. It's going to be a rifleman that's going to show up in position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, and we're going to roll a die. Then we're going to drop a rifleman in there. So let's say, for example, we rolled a 2. And if we roll a 2, that's actually this column here, because we can see the 2 that's marked up the top right up here. So it means a rifleman's going to show up at the bottom of this attack kind of column, if you would, and he's going to push everybody else up 1 spot. So basically how we can see, and as more attackers come into these spots, they get closer to our positions, and then it's up to us in these defensive positions to take them out. So as we take this zoomed out look right now, we can see that one of the challenges of the game is to position our defenders in ways that's going to enable us to take out the German attackers as they come up these various lanes of attack. We'll talk a little bit about how Germans can attack momentarily, but let's do a quick look at our American defenders and talk a little bit about their characteristics and how they operate. All right, so now we're looking at 3 of the 19 US defenders that can be anywhere in one of 13 different defensive positions along Lanzerath Ridge. Now the starting positions are dictated by the game setup. You don't get to pick these. We can see here though that we've got in this defensive firing position number 2, the hexagonal one, we've got Parkera, Hart, and Pambas. So again, I've renamed all of the original historical defenders with 19 viewers that have volunteered somewhat bravely, I will say, to be part of this perhaps doomed contingent. Let's take a quick look at what some of these numbers mean on each one of these counters. We'll start with the biggest one, which is the 4, the 3, and the 2. This is the soldier's valor rating. The higher the better. And again, I will say that I completely randomly attached names to soldiers. Now these go to a low of 2 up to a high of 6. We have, I think, 3 or 4 soldiers that have a valor rating of 6. And why the valor rating is important? Well, the valor rating is important because in a number of different ways, the German forces are going to roll a D6 if they make attacks on some of our soldiers. And we'll see how that works as we get further into the gameplay. But one way it might happen, for example, if a German soldier gets into a defensive position, the number below them tells you how many D6s they roll against each soldier. So if this rifleman were to breach this position here, he's going to roll a D6 against Hart, Parkera, and Pambas. And if he rolls their valor rating or higher, the soldier breaks. If he rolls lower than the valor rating, then the soldier doesn't break. So Pambas here with a 2, and actually historically this soldier's name was Queen, and he's actually the only soldier out of the 19-man contingent that died in the battle. The rest were all captured at the end of the 4th wave when they got flanked. So we're going to try to do a little bit better for Pambas as opposed to his historical counterpart. So we can see the valor rating is very important. The higher, the better. Now there's a few other things to note. In the bottom right-hand corner, we can see this D8, D8, and D6. This is the die that you roll, the number of sided die that you roll when you make your attacks. There are 4 different dice in the game. D6s, D8s, D10s, and D12s. And so we can see here that Hart and Parkera have D8s, so they would be rolling one of these dice if we happen to get a chance to get them to fire. And Pambas is only rolling a D6. So again, Pambas drawing a little bit of the short straw here in terms of being one of our soldiers in this battle. So now if we look at the top right here, we can see that we've got 2 different colors. We've got this kind of lighter olive green, if you would, and then a regular green perhaps. And we've got an A and a C. These are the different squads that they're in. So Hart is in squad A. Parkera, even though he's got a star, he's in squad A. He just has a special characteristic that we'll talk about in a minute. And then Pambas is in squad C. So they're in different squads here. There are a couple of actions that can't, there's one action I think that can't cross squad lines. And we'll talk a little bit about what those are now. So now I've pulled out 5 defenders that exhibit a variety of the different types of abilities that our soldiers can have. And let's start with Dento here on the left. He's got an M beside his helmet there, which basically means that he has the capacity to operate one of our 3 machine guns. And the machine guns are key in this battle because they allow us to fire multiple shots and have a much higher hit rate. So those are key, and his ability is good because he's one of our soldiers who knows how to work the machine gun. Now, the A requires a little bit of a longer explanation. Basically, the A is called an assist, and the assist ability means that you can unexhaust a soldier, and that gets us to exhaust. If a soldier performs a major action, like firing at German soldiers during the particular wave, they become exhausted. And that means they're done for the whole wave. They can't fire or do another major action or even do anything else. They're basically done for the whole wave. However, an A is an assist ability, which means you can exhaust yourself and bring someone back to full capacity. So if Parkera fires, he's exhausted, and then in the next action, Pambas could use his assist ability to bring Parkera back. Now Parkera can't fire twice in the same turn, but he could fire later in the same wave. So that assist ability in placing those characters is going to, placing those soldiers is going to be really important because that's going to allow some of our better soldiers to be able, and machine gunners and stuff like that, to perform fire and kind of fire multiple times or do other things more than once. Now, we can see here on Parkera's rating, he's got a little bit of a star on the top right. This is the Inspire ability, and this one's particularly powerful. This Inspire ability means that if you're sharing a firing position with someone else in the same squad and they fire, you get an extra die for that attack. So normally Indy would roll 1d8 when he's firing, but if he's in the same foxhole with Parkera and Parkera isn't disrupted or tired or exhausted, then Indy gets to roll 2d8s. That's good. Now, Parkera is in squad A. He's got the same light green, kind of the olive green band, which means he can only inspire Indy in squad A or other members of squad A. He could not inspire Pambas because he's in a different squad. But we have 2 guys, Ray over here, and then one more of our soldiers who are kind of non-squad. They got this kind of redder band up here. That means they can inspire anybody. So they're extremely useful, and positioning Ray is going to be kind of a key importance to kind of our whole defense here. So a couple more to go through. We can see here Indy's got an RI. This is basically, we have 2 different radios in the game. We have an intelligence radio where we can report kind of intelligence that we kind of glean from the German assault. And then we have an artillery radio as well. Indy here can operate the intelligence radio. If I were to bring down 0, he can operate the artillery radio. And we look here at Ray, he can operate any radio because he's got an R beside him here. So those are our 3 radio operators. I don't know in this game how much we're going to be doing of that because I'm not quite sure yet if I've got the capacity and the skill yet to be able to have troops doing that, but we'll see how it goes. Lastly, I want to take a look at Ray. You'll notice Ray's Valor is a 6. He's got the star to inspire anybody. He rolls a 2d6 for his attack. He can work either of the radios. And he's got this C here. The C is particularly powerful. That's the command rating. That means Ray can unexhaust, can kind of revitalize 3 different soldiers in either his own defensive position or one that's connected immediately next to his. So using Ray's command ability, which would exhaust him, is kind of a key way to regain and revitalize 3 soldiers in the middle of a wave. So that's probably how we would want to use Ray as the attacks start to come hot and heavy. Let's take a quick look at how we can take out German attackers. So say, for example, we're going to have Hart fire at this rifleman because he's getting close to the barbed wire, kind of working his way up into positions, and we want to keep this spot open. So Hart has a D8. So if he's going to fire, we know that he's going to roll 1d8. However, we know that Parkera is in the same squad and has the inspiration ability. So Parkera makes Hart be all that more effective, and Hart gets to roll 2d8s when he fires. Now, you'll notice on the rifleman's position here, there's a 4 to the left side of it. This is the number that we have to roll or higher in order to be able to take the rifleman out. So if Hart were to fire and roll a 1 and a 6, 6 is equal or higher than the 4, that would have been a successful attack, and the rifleman is removed from the attack. Hart would have fired, which is a major action that would exhaust him. The inspire attribute just basically exists. It doesn't take any energy to do that. Parkera is just naturally inspirational. And that's a rough idea on how combat works. Now, we do have other things to talk about too, which are the machine guns, and we'll talk a little bit more about those after we get into the game. They work somewhat on a similar way, but they have some special attributes that make them much more powerful. One other thing to mention briefly is how line of sight works in the battle. So each of our defensive positions has a color attached to it. So this is basically a square on the top signifying defensive position number 1, and it's got the square brown box around it. The way the line of sight mechanic works, it's pretty cool actually. It can fire, the brown can fire at anything that's brown. So we see we've got a brown circle here. That means this firing position can fire at this one. This firing position likewise can fire at this one. If we look over here, this firing position, our firing position 2 with this red, with the hexagon here, is both orange and brown. That means it can fire at both orange positions and brown positions. So Hart could fire at anyone in here, could also fire over here at any attackers coming up on this western flank. Now, you'll also notice that there are some of these little +1 lines. If anyone from a brown firing position that has the brown in it fires across one of these lines, we add 1 to their attack roll, which means it's going to be harder to hit. And so that's basically just kind of a quick overview of how range works in the game and how line of sight works. And so we'll see that as it plays out, just kind of a minor point that I wanted to make sure was clear. So there's a couple of big picture things to understand too about how we're going to be able to defend in this battle. First up, we talk about how the German attack waves come, where each phase in this attack wave, they're going to flip 3 cards and do 3 things based on those cards. After they do that, then it's the defender's chance to react. And the defenders can do 5 actions in each of their turns. So we have these little 5 markers that we're going to drop on someone when they do an action. And a defender can only do 1 action per turn, so they couldn't move and fire. We could move someone, but then they couldn't fire in that turn until we get 3 more actions by the Germans, and then perhaps they could. But it's furthermore, the US defenders have 2 types of actions. Broadly speaking, you can have a major action, which exhausts you and flips you over, and you're kind of done for that particular wave unless someone kind of assists you and bring you back into action. Or you can do a minor action. Now, minor actions cost us 1 of our tokens, as does a major action, but it doesn't exhaust you. And one of them, for example, is to move from one zone to the next zone that's connected by these white dots. So if we wanted to move Irish from zone 3 here over here, it would be 1 of our 5 actions, but he's not exhausted. So that means in the next turn, after the next German 3 cards, he's going to be fine and ready to go and can do something. So part of the game and part of the battle, I think, is going to be deciding when we're going to use a major action, when we're going to use a minor action, and how to do those well. Some of the other minor actions, the machine guns are either in place, but we can, or start the game in place, but we can dismount them, carry them around, and then put them in another emplacement someplace else on the battlefield. We can reload our machine guns and all different things like that. So part of the art of the battle here, I think, is determining when and how to use the major and minor actions. Before we do an overview of all of our defenders, let's talk about how we can lose the game. There's 2 ways we can lose the game immediately. One is if at the end of any particular full turn, there is an active German attacker in any one of our defensive positions. And basically, if an attacker gets into our position, so for example, this Fallschirmjäger would kind of reach us in this defensive position, he's going to get to roll 2 d6s against both defenders. So say he rolls a 4 and a 1, he's going to disrupt Indy, and say he rolls another 4 and a 1 or something like that. That means he's going to disrupt David. That means these two defenders are disrupted. Then when it goes to our turn, a disrupted defender can't take an action, and we can't move anyone. And the only way we can get rid of this attacker is by a close combat action. It's automatic, and it's a major action that exhausts the defender, but they have to be undisrupted, and they can't have previously taken an action. So we can't bring anyone in from a side position to try to take out this attacker, nor if both Dave T and Indy were disrupted, they couldn't do anything either. So if this happens, we lose immediately. And so that's why we have to be extremely careful about having attackers get into our defensive positions. The second way we can lose the battle immediately is if morale falls to 0. Each time a defender takes a hit, they get disrupted. But if a disrupted defender takes a hit, takes a second one, they are eliminated. They're a casualty and they're taken out of the battle. And that, every time that happens, our morale falls by 1. So if over the course of successive waves, our morale goes all the way down to 0, if we lose 5 defenders essentially, we're going to lose the battle that way as well. Now there's things we haven't really talked about. We haven't talked about radioing in artillery help. We haven't talked about radioing out intelligence about the German assault. We haven't really talked about the machine guns and their ammunition, but that is a factor. The machine guns don't have a ton of ammunition, and if we run out of ammunition with our machine guns, that's a big setback for us. So we have to be somewhat cautious about how we're going to burn through the ammunition. So there's kind of lots of little bits and bobs. There's some booby traps that the first wave of German attackers are going to hit that's going to take out one attacker as they get to those positions and things. But most of those things I think we'll be able to explain as we dig into the actual battle itself. So we're going to leave those for now. And before we end this episode, what I thought we would do is just kind of take a sweep over our defensive positions and take a look at our 19 defenders and to see what we've got and where. So here is the west side of our defense, and let's take a look at each of our individual positions and see who's in them and see what kind of ratings they've got. On the very west, we have Royst and Dento of Squad A, Valor ratings of 3 apiece, and they both can operate this 19 M1918 machine gun that fires a D10, so pretty effective. However, this only, at the start of the game, it only has 6 rounds of ammunition, so we have to be somewhat careful about how frequently we fire it. Let's slide a little bit more to the east as we work west to east here. We've got our foxhole that we looked at before, Parkera, who can inspire anybody else in Squad A with a Valor rating of 4, firing a D8. Hart right beside him from Squad A also fires a D8, a little bit less on the morale than Pambas again, who was historically the only US soldier that died in this engagement. From Squad C, he's got that valuable assist capability, fires a D6, and hopefully doesn't take much fire because that Valor rating of 2 is going to crack him pretty quickly. Moving forward a little bit more, let's go to our next 2 positions. Starting on the interior now, so these are in these interior waves. We've got Scratch and Super P, both of Squad A, firing D8s. Scratch with a very high Valor rating of 5 and Super P with a Valor rating of 3. To their east, we have Dave T, Valor rating of 3, fires a D8, also in Squad A. And then Indy, who can operate that radio, the intelligence radio, fires a D8 as well. Let's move a little bit more to the west. To the east again, sorry, all by himself. So why is Irish by himself? Why is he the only one in this foxhole? I'm not sure. Squad B, Valor rating of 3 and fires a D8. Behind him, up at the log cabin as the battle starts, we have Zero, Barney, and Vargas. Not the most valorous of all, but Barney and Vargas from Squad C with this valuable assist rating, so we can move them and position them in some better places. And then Zero can operate our artillery radio, as well as inspire anybody else in Squad C. So we definitely want to think about how we want to reposition him to be able to take advantage of that valuable inspire ability. We're going to go behind the lines now. If we go behind the lines, to our first position. This is our radio jeep. These don't move anywhere in the game, but if we send soldiers back here with the radio ability for this is the intelligence radio, we can kind of get some victory points towards the end here by using that. We'll talk about that if it comes up in the course of gameplay. Let's go take a look at our next jeep as we're working our way well to the east now. This is the artillery jeep. This can actually be very valuable because it can negate one entire 3 sequence of cards if we can get that mechanic to work right. We'll talk about that should we get to that in the gameplay though. Our third and final immobile jeep is our M2 jeep. This has our valuable M2 machine gun. Fires a D12 if it's emplaced, and also I'm going to just go up here to take a look at its ammunition because it's got a ton of ammo. Check it out. By far the most ammo of our machine guns in the game. So a very valuable machine gun, and we want to think about maybe replacing this someplace else so it's going to be more effective. We'll talk about that as we get closer to the action. Let's go down now, looking at our last foxholes on the east side here. So we've got Ray and Lil, kind of in the middle, both extremely valorous here. Ray has a valor of 6. He's got the command rating, can inspire anybody, fires a 2d6. Lil from squad B with the valor of 6, the valuable machine gunner rating too. So maybe we want to have Lil. We might actually send Lil along this little dotted line to pick up the M2 and then perhaps bring it down here to one of these forward firing positions. That's a thought. We go to the east, we have Stone in one of our front foxholes towards the east side. They have the M1919 machine gun. He is a machine gunner. He has the valuable command rating and he can inspire anybody with a valor of 6. Likewise, Joey to his right in the same foxhole can fire the machine gun from squad B with also that very high valor rating of a 6. We go a little bit more to the east, we get an empty firing position. And lastly, if we come up here, we can see on the far eastern spot, we have Rabinov and Lonuski, both of our defenders trying to defend this outer eastern flank, valor of 4 and 5 respectively, both from squad B, but Rabinov has this valuable inspire characteristic only for members in squad B. He's not one of our 2 leaders that can inspire anybody in the whole platoon. They both fire D8s, and that covers our flanking positions from west to east and all the positions in between. All right, and with that, I think we've covered almost all of the big kind of key mechanics in Lanzerath Ridge and a little bit of an explanation. So hopefully that'll enable people, it's not intended as a tutorial, it's just intended as a way for you to understand the action a little bit better and not be so lost. So with that, I think we're set. We've kind of talked about our defensive positions and covered all those key mechanics. Let me know down below, how many waves do you think we're going to survive? Again, we have to survive 4 to win the game. We're going to make it through 4, we're going to make it through 2, and when I did the practice battle, made it to the very last 3 cards in wave 2 before the attackers broke through our western flank and overtook the defenders there. So almost made it through 2 waves. That would have been a major defeat had we reached that. We lost in wave 2. So let me know what you down below. Also, let me know, who do you think is going to be our greatest hero? Who's going to take out the most German attackers? I'd be curious to hear what people think there. Who do you think won't survive? I don't know. Lots of things going on here. So we will be back in a day or so. I look forward to seeing us as we start to take on. I'll put a link to the episode as soon as it's ready. We'll see you in a day or two as we dig into attack wave number 1.